How's it going, guys? I'm an avid herpetologist. Welcome back to the channel. I'm actually filming off location today. I'm actually up in Tallahassee, Florida for a bit of a business venture for the next couple of days. So this video is going to be filmed in a location different than where I usually am. Today we're going to be revisiting a video idea that I actually had back a couple of months ago. So originally the idea was to do color by color, a video series talking about all of the staples and sideboard cards available in the Digimon TCG. Now, back when I first tried this idea out, I really didn't have a whole lot of video editing experience. I've kind of picked up some skills here and there, but initially the first product was well over an hour long. Well longer than I would have liked it to have been. Especially now that we have the brand new Mulligan rules coming to the Digimon TCG, a lot of people have started talking more about the potential for sideboards eventually being added into the Digimon TCG as a mainstay as well. In the next couple of videos, we're going to be going over the basics of what sideboarding is, how sideboarding works, and specifically talking about some of the best cards in each color that I think are going to be great candidates to see more play once sideboards become a mainstay part of the Digimon TCG. To begin with, what exactly is a sideboard for? Well, for those of you who are unfamiliar, a sideboard is a collection that is usually 15 cards in addition to your primary deck that you are playing the game with. During games 2 and 3, if you are playing a best of 3 event, you have the option of bringing some of the cards from your sideboard into your main deck. Generally speaking, these swaps are going to be 1 for 1, which means whenever you are bringing a card into your main deck from your sideboard, you also have to take a card out of your main deck. Now, not every game follows this rule, and how specifically Digimon decides to implement sideboards will, of course, we'll have to wait and see if Bandai ends up deciding to make that final change. Since currently in the Digimon TCG, there is a rigid deck building rule where your main deck must be exactly 50 cards, I think it's unlikely that we're going to be able to add more cards from our sideboard than we take out of our main deck. So more than likely, I would say expect this 1-for-1 trade. Every card you bring in from your sideboard, you must take one card out of your main board, and then once the round is done and you have played all 3 games, if you get to game 3, then after that round, you swap your cards back, so your main deck must stay the same between each round. Sideboards generally change how we approach deck building on a fundamental level. Especially in the Digimon TCG, you may notice there are a lot of cards out there, such as Floodgates, and specific removal options that are going to be better against certain archetypes and not as strong against others. The purpose of a sideboard is to let you bring in more tech-specific cards that are going to be better against certain matchups and not against others, that you don't have to commit to a slot in your main board. This lets you commit the 50 cards in your primary deck to cards that are going to specifically be good in your list. You don't have to worry about bringing in cards that are going to potentially be dead against certain matchups. The overall goal for your sideboard is to give you access to specialized cards that can help you in matchups that may not be favorable for your specific archetype. As a result of sideboards, certain cards that are better in specific matchups tend to have their stock value go up a little bit because people have more of a reason to add them to their collections and bring them with them to specific events because there's more likely to actually be a reason to want to see those cards. Using Magic the Gathering as a great example here, there are plenty of cards such as Red Elemental Blast, Blue Elemental Blast, Graveyard hate cards such as Tormod's Crypt. These are cards that are not going to be useful against the general majority of the decks that you may come up against, but having them in your sideboard means when you do come up against a deck that these cards are particularly good against, you have the option of bringing those cards in and adding them to your strategy without having to potentially suffer by sticking them in your main board and having to see them every single game. Now, the big card games out there, specifically talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic the Gathering in particular, which tend to play best of 3 tournaments, have 15 card sideboards, which means in addition to your main deck, you are allowed to bring 15 tech cards that you can bring in during games 2 and 3. Now, how Digimon decides to implement sideboards remains to be seen. They've already experimented with 10 card and 5 card sideboards, which are a lot more restrictive than what we would be seeing in other games, but who knows? By the time that they finally decide to implement sideboards, if they do, we may see a full 15 card sideboard or something else entirely. In that regard, we're just going to have to wait and see, unfortunately. When considering a sideboard, there are a few primary categories of cards you're going to want to look into. The list includes the following. Number 1, niche archetype cards. These are going to include cards that you may already be running in your primary deck that happen to be even stronger against specific archetypes. So you may run less than 4 in your main deck with extra copies in your sideboard to bring in when needed. Next is going to be Floodgates. In the Digimon TCG, Floodgate currently refers to any number of rookies which hinder one or both players' ability to cheat resources, be it gaining memory, reducing Digivolution costs, etc. We also have Aggro Counters. These are cards looking to counter strategies playing lots of small bodies to push a more aggressive game plan. Something I'm going to refer to as Stack Counters, which are cards meant to hinder strategies committing resources to a single tall stack. And finally, Control Counters, cards meant to damage slower strategies that aim to control the board with lots of removal or slowly accrue resources over time. Now, these categories are certainly not all-encompassing, and there are going to be times where you may find a card that absolutely suits more than one of these categories. These kind of flexible cards are even more valuable in a sideboard environment, especially when you do have tight sideboards of only 5 to 10 cards, when you only get so many slots to commit to these special niche choices. Now, I'm going to specifically be leaving out in these videos the tech archetype niche cards because obviously those are going to vary depending on your particular strategy. Now what we're going to do is go through each one of these categories and discuss what I think might be some of the best contenders for cards that are going to fill the desired role for each one of these particular niches. First up, we're going to talk about Floodgates. Now, Red currently, as of BT12, only has access to 2, in the form of Gaussmon and Solarmon. Gaussmon has an effect on the opponent's turn that prevents them from reducing Digivolution costs. As the game continues to progress, Floodgates that wall reduction of evolution cost are likely to grow in value as the game continues to speed up, so keep this one on your radar. Solarmon has much more immediate value. On both turns, neither player is able to reduce play costs. This card already sees a great deal of play to help counter strategies including Beelstarmon, Crossheart, Blue Flare, Dorbikmon, and any deck running Death Xmon. It's important to remember that Solarmon affects both players, so be sure you consider whether or not this card could affect your own deck building before including it. Next up, we're going to be looking at cards able to counter aggro strategies. Now, the number one best card for this job has to be without a doubt Crimson Blaze. Crimson Blaze has a cost of 6, but reduces that cost for every Digimon your opponent has in play. This card destroys all Digimon they control with 6,000 DP or less, and has the additional benefit of locking your opponent out of playing Digimon by effect until the end of their next turn. This gives the card some nice additional flexibility, especially with so many decks picking up floating effects that can provide additional value even if you remove their board state. This card is exceptional against decks like Dark Knightmon, Aegistermon, Rookie Rush, Jesmon, and Bloom Hydra. If Crimson Blaze isn't enough, or you're feeling spicy, you can also consider its Digimon inspiration, a favorite of mine, Jukwamon. When digivolving, Jukwamon requires your opponent to choose one of their Digimon and deletes all Digimon on the field beside that target and Jukwamon himself. Afterwards, you gain memory back equal to the number of your opponent's Digimon deleted, which in some cases could easily result in a free Digivolution, with some decks even allowing this play to go memory positive. Additionally, each time an opponent's Digimon is deleted on your turn, this card gets an extra security check. Now, against some of the aforementioned strategies like Bloom Hydra and Jesmon, this can easily flip the game from a massive board state into a potential OTK as long as your deck can support the Mega level Digivolution. This strategy could prove most effective in decks that are able to support hybrid Digimon. Since this card is going to be clearing both players' fields aside from this singular Digimon, you really have two primary ways of ending the game afterwards, being of course the Blitz Omnimon, being able to digivolve directly onto Jukwamon himself, or being able to play a hybrid onto an empty board state and swing an additional time for game. Since Jukwamon is most likely going to be bringing you back memory positive from its Digivolution, you should have plenty of memory to do the hybrid play. Additional options to consider include Omnimon Alter S, a card with some particular value against decks like Armor Rush, which have some built-in protection against board wipes, and BT9 Dino Rexmon. Dino Rexmon provides a really unique board controlling effect that will continue to oppress the opponent's small bodies rather than have one single blowout turn. If you're worried about aggressive board states, definitely consider bringing in some of these cards. Coming up next, we'll be discussing stack building counters. Generally speaking, these answers are the most linear, coming in the form of removal cards. Red has the king of staple removal, one of the first cards ever printed in the game, Gaia Force. Gaia Force is a very simple card. Pay 8 memory and destroy an opponent's Digimon. Cards like this that remove a single body are incredibly important when trying to best OTK strategies such as Grandis, Melga X, Blackwar Greymon X, Alphamon, and a plethora of others. Archetypes looking to invest their resources into a single, powerful Digimon can have their backs broken by a single removal card. And while Gaia Force is certainly usable from the hand, this card really shines against OTK strategies where hitting this card in security can potentially end an opponent's turn on the spot. If you are playing a stat build list of your own, there are also a few other cards you can consider that can help push the opponent back while furthering your own strategy. Several of these are variations of Omnimon, with BT1 Omnimon letting you destroy anybody on the board, along with any other Digimon with the same name. We also have Omnimon Merciful Mode, having a similar removal effect that gains additional value for each mega in your stack, and packing an additional niche but powerful trash removal effect. BT5 Omnimon X, which is great for preventing attacks by aggressive strategies while also having additional removal for the following turn, and BT10 Omnimon X, coming with an on Digivolve removal effect that gets around Digimon with protection from destruction. One last card you can consider if you want a spice pick is Agumon Bond of Bravery. While this card is largely considered past its prime, a quick read of this card may have you thinking differently. For a small Digivolution cost of only 3 memory, you get a when attacking effect where as long as you control a tamer, you can delete an opponent's Digimon with 13,000 DP or less, a range wide enough to out most bodies. Additionally, each time an opponent's Digimon is deleted, you can trash one of your opponent's security, helping push the game closer to an end. And lastly, we'll take a look at some sideboard options to help handle control strategies. These decks can vary widely in their deck composition and playstyle, so picking the proper answers will depend on which decks you consider the most troublesome. Control strategies generally tend to be much slower, playing lots of removal cards and accruing bits of value over time. Since the hallmark of many control strategies involves playing removal cards to be found when doing security checks, one of the best cards to help in these matchups is a Delicate Plan. For a single memory, you can provide one of your Digimon freedom from activating pesky security effects on option cards for the turn. This card has become a mainboard staple in decks looking to clear lots of security in a single turn, helping smash through purple-yellow decks like Security Control, Ophanimon Loop, and Mastemon. Even outside of those decks, it's not unheard of for plenty of other strategies to run a few removal options to help stage off OTK decks. So rogue copies of Cocytus Breath, Gaia Force, and many others can also be a hindrance. If a one-cost removal option isn't your thing, BT1 War Greymon packs a very similar effect and has also proven extremely popular, especially in Greymon strategies, to help deal with a lot of these more pesky control decks. Now, if swinging into security for safe checks isn't quite your thing, you can also go the trashing route via Gallantmon Crimson Mode. While the on Digivolve removal is great, we really want to see this card for its second effect. When attacking, you can trash an opponent's security, plus 1 additional security for every 10 cards in their trash. This card is amazing, not just to help clear the way of potential removal, but against certain decks like Beelzemon and Machinedramon, which load their trash anyway. This card can be an absolute blowout. In fact, there's even a much more accessible option in regular Gallantmon from BT2. Mark my words, if Digimon does adopt sideboards regularly, this card is likely to see a big-time stock increase, packing an almost identical security trashing effect for 4 memory on a level 6 body. BT10 Omnimon X makes another appearance here with an incredibly valuable on Digivolve and when attacking effect that can let you return a single X antibody or level 6 Digivolution source to the bottom of the deck in order to look at your opponent's entire security and trash any card you like. This effect not only lets you spot remove the most troublesome security your opponent has, it simultaneously gives you free knowledge to everything else you could potentially run into. And trust me, gaining free knowledge is not something you should underestimate. Now, the last card I want to talk about is Avenge Kidmon. Released as a counter to the Three Musketeer strategies, this card also functions as a counter to any deck leaning heavily on trashing large amounts of option cards. This card reduces its play cost by 1 for each option card in both players' trash, and when entering the field will place all of those option cards directly to the bottom of the player's deck. Removing large quantities of option cards can severely hinder certain strategies, namely Beelzemon and Beelstarmon, but it's worth noting that this card is definitely more niche than a lot of the other cards I've mentioned on this list. And yeah, with that, that's going to about do it, guys. I hope you guys found this guide at least a little bit useful as we continue to look forward to the future of the Digimon TCG. With that, I am an avid herpetologist. If these videos are ones that you guys are enjoying, please feel free to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment down below. Let me know any other spicy tech sideboard cards that you think are going to start seeing a lot more play if those sideboards ever are actually implemented into the Digimon TCG. I hope you all have a great rest of your night, and I will see you all next time.